Is it really possible to co-parent peacefully during and after a divorce? Some of you are probably already shaking your head. No, it's not. But I promise you, there are some ways to do that. Well, I'm not going to promise you. Actually, our guest, Jill Barnett Kaufman, who is here with us today, is going to challenge you to see if you could do it differently, see it as possible. So stick around because she's going to share communication strategies and some ideas that can foster a peaceful and healthier process when you're going through divorce. My name is Cheryl Bassett. I'm founder of Unstoppable Connections, international bestseller, and creator of the award-winning Unstoppable Family Meeting Toolkit. I am also the host for the show, Kitchen Table Conversations, as part of the Edge Network. Families do tap into my 4 gifts, which is really a reflection of my family's journey and how we became a team and how we chose to come together. And you can learn more about the 4 gifts that I share at unstoppableconnections.com. Or if you want to be on the show or you have an idea for the show, you can also reach out to me at kitchentableconversations.com. So I want to set an intention for the show, and I do this for every show. I just feel like it's so important to do, which is, because what we do on the show is we feature the fun stuff to the tough stuff and everything in between. At the end of the day, it's all important. And we do everything to ignite conversations, to strengthen our families, and to create a positive ripple out into the world. We also ground the show in the 4th gift of the gifts I get to share, which is the gift of love. And we unwrap the gift of love by choosing to celebrate ourselves and others. And it's with that intention and that heart that we come to every show to celebrate the person who's come here today to share their heart, their passion, their talents, their expertise with us. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Jill Barnett Kaufman. And she is, I'm going to read this so I got it right, but she's a divorce and co-parenting expert, has over 20 years experience as a licensed therapist, divorce coach, divorce mediator, and parent educator. She's helped hundreds of individuals and families work through the transitions of divorce with less stress, more confidence, and a greater sense of peace. That's really important, a greater sense of peace. It's important for everyone involved. She's also a sought after public speaker and leader, having led workshops and trainings at corporations, schools, religious institutions, and conferences. She's a mother of 3 adult children and is committed to helping families thrive during the process of divorce. So with that, I want to bring her on so you can meet her. Hi, Jill.
Hi, Cheryl. How are you?
Good. It's so great to have you here. And, a little different twist of a topic for us today, because we always think about the family connection stuff, but really this is so important, right? The connection is probably more important during this time frame in some ways, even though the family might be coming apart. There's things that have to come together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let me start off, though, by just kind of jumping into understanding what drove you to do what you do. Like, what's your passion? Where did you start? How did you get into doing what you're doing and working with the families?
So I'll try to make it a short story, but when my first son was born, I was in banking, and I didn't want to stay in banking. So when he was born, I ended up leaving that, and I found this training to be a parent educator. So I started teaching parenting classes, and I loved it. But the people who I taught the classes to wanted to continue with me, and I was like, I'm not a therapist, I can't really do that. So eventually I was like, I should become a therapist. So I went back to graduate school, and I started doing, just general counseling. And then after I went through my divorce, I realized how little support there is out there for people going through divorce. And so I really focused everything on divorce and co-parenting. And that's my main work right now. I'm a divorce coach. I do a little bit of divorce mediation, and the parenting piece that I learned from my years of teaching parenting classes is so helpful when you're going through divorce, or when you're not, but especially when you're going through divorce.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting because, in some ways I look back at my journey. My parents were married for 21 years and it was a disaster. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you, it was a complete disaster, right? And so, I kind of wanted to do it differently. And then I did get divorced. I'm remarried now. But just like the kids getting in the middle of it and how unhealthy, right, that can be. So so how does it start with you? Like when they, like, what's the first piece of advice you give to somebody when you start working with them?
Well, the way I look at it is that you're really focusing on the best interests of the children. And if you can both agree to do that, that makes it a lot easier. A lot of people want to do that, but find it difficult to do that because there's so many other things going on while you're going through divorce, and even after you've already divorced, that, they get caught up in, the fighting about the little stuff, and they don't see the big picture. So I really try to have people think about the children first and make all your decisions, everything that you're, that you decide you have to think about their interests first.
Right. So would you say that part of it is just really doing the best you can to stay focused on the big picture? Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I always think like, and we all have different ways of doing things. And, I always think about like we go from A to Z. And if we all know that we want to go from A to Z and there's an agreement in that, how we get there might be different. But if we can have that sort of that benefit of the doubt that Z is still where we're going, that maybe that helps too. I don't know. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, the problem is with when you're going through divorce, there's so many things that you have to think about. You have to think about the finances, where you're going to live. You have to think about, custody and how you're going to split holidays. And I mean, and then you think about the extended family. It's very overwhelming. So when people are starting the process, they really, just try to grab on to anything that they can to, get clarity. And it's really hard to do that when you're, overwhelmed. And you're also, I mean, no matter if you decided that you want a divorce or if the other person did, there's always a shock factor, that this is really happening. There's grief that, oh my God, I'm losing this intact family. What is going to happen to my children? All these feelings that you're going through, it's really hard to think about the best interests of the children and think clearly about that.
Mm-hmm. So clarity. I mean, clarity in life in any aspect of our lives, obviously, is huge. And I think, like you say, during that time frame, the emotions are high, and and there isn't a lot of, sometimes I feel like if we know the end result, we would be fine. The problem is we don't know what that's going to look like, right? It's the unknown,
right?
That's scary, right? So do you give them like steps that they can walk through a little bit on that clarity factor? Is that what you are helping them to do?
Yes. I mean, everybody has different priorities. So one person may want to keep the family home. Another person may want a certain schedule for the kids, because you can see, let's say it's 50% custody. It can be 1 week on, 1 week off, or it can be Monday, Tuesday with one parent, Wednesday, Thursday with the other, every other weekend, or it can be one parent has them during the week, the other one on the weekends. Like there's so many options, and like maybe one of those is really important for somebody, or maybe there's so many things that could be important. Every person is different and has different priorities. So clarifying priorities is really one of the things that we focus on. What is really important to you? And, someone may say, well, I want that, antique that we bought that's in the living room, and I really don't want him to have it, and they think that's so important, and it may not be as important as what they think it is,
Yeah. So help me to understand. So if somebody comes to you, are you usually working with both the parents?
I do so many different things with respect to that. I'm working currently with a couple who are just deciding to divorce, and they just want to do it in the best way so that they can have better communication. Actually, one of the people is the one who wants it, the other one doesn't, but they're both open to working together to do the divorce in a constructive way. I work with individuals, just helping them clarify their goals because lawyers don't do that. Divorce attorneys don't work with people to clarify their goals. They just really want the best deal, the most money, the most time, or whatever it is. I don't want to generalize. There are some attorneys that do help with that, but that's not really their role.
Their role is to represent that particular person and have it be the best possible for them.
Right, exactly.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'll work with an individual to kind of clarify where their priorities are. But I also work with people who are going through divorce or already divorced who are having trouble co-parenting together. And, if you didn't have a successful marriage, probably your communication wasn't so great.
Right.
So how do you communicate together when you're getting a divorce, So I really teach them some good communication skills. I also do couples counseling, surprisingly. So,
Okay.
The same communication skills in couples counseling as in co-parenting.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to think, because you made me think of something else, and this is really like a little bit side thing, but even when somebody like a parent passes away and the kids are trying to divide up, you were making me think about that. Like, oh my gosh, I have to have that. And it's usually not that important. And it's really not worth the end of a relationship, right? In a family, but that happens a lot too. And again, it's when emotions are high and there's a big life change going on. So I know that some of the things you talked about were ways that some ideas for fostering that peace. Are there ways to step into it? Especially when you have one who wants to and one who doesn't, is there a?
Yeah. I mean, so when you have someone who doesn't want the divorce, what I try to do is encourage the person who's asking for the divorce to be empathetic, to understand that they're probably a lot farther along in the process of grieving and just processing the divorce than the person who doesn't want the divorce. It takes time, it really is a shock because, when you get married, you don't expect to divorce, and you don't think about it. If you're not the one who's asking for it, you probably didn't think much about it, or if you did, you didn't think about it seriously. And thinking about divorce is so much different than actually going through divorce.
Right.
Everybody gets, marriages have ups and downs, and people who go through downs in their marriages sometimes may think about divorce, but that's a whole different ballgame than going through the divorce. It's really, it's like a death, and the problem, I compare the death of a spouse is very different than a divorce, even though the feelings are similar, because when a spouse dies, what happens? The whole community comes to you. They bring you food for dinners. They come, you have a funeral, and you really get the support of your community, which is so important when you're going through a loss. And when you're going through divorce, some people don't even tell their closest friends and family. Some people, just keep to themselves. Friends and family may not even know what to say to them. So there's not usually that support from the community when you're going through a divorce, and you need that. So that's what's so really tragic in terms of divorce in general, that you don't get the support that you need. And it's so helpful to have that support.
Yeah. And so do you work with them in terms of how to ask for that support sometimes?
How to create a support network. You really have to find the people who you can count on, who you can be honest with, who will be there for you through thick and thin. And, so those are the friends and family. Then you also need an attorney or, a divorce coach or a therapist, all who have different roles, maybe a CDFA, which is a certified divorce financial analyst, who are specialized in divorce. So, and then a support group, so there's a lot of ways for you to build that community yourself, but it just doesn't happen. You really have to build it.
Right. Well, I would even think you'd run into the issue where you had friends that were friends with both individuals, and they probably don't know what to do, right? Because they don't want to pick a side. And if they communicate with one and not the other, or, whatever, then they might feel like they are picking a side, even though they're not, you know what I mean? So I think, that would be, that makes it challenging on everybody. So.
Yeah. And one of the, one of the parties may feel that if a friend, continues a friendship with the other, then they can't be friends with them. So, there's a lot of emotions and conflict there.
I'm just curious, only because I have a friend right now who's going through kind of a not a good process at all. But social media has come into play. Do you address the social media aspect of things? Because I feel like that could get out of hand too, pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would say stay away from it. Be private about this. If you put yourself out there, there are some people who are so judgmental and don't realize how hurtful they can be. So I run this Facebook group, Separation and Divorce Support Community, and one of the rules there is be kind. And you'd be surprised that there's some people in that group who say, you should stay with your spouse. It's the worst thing you can do for your children to leave. And, I had to remove that person from the group because you can't put that pressure on people. You haven't walked in their shoes. You don't know what goes on behind closed doors, and to make a judgment on somebody else's life decisions is really hard. So, when you put yourself out there on social media, you're opening yourself up to that judgment.
Yeah, and I would even think from a legal standpoint, there's just things you don't want to be sharing out there. Because I know I have a friend he's an attorney and does some of the work, and I was just like, he said,
oh yeah, everything on social media. I had many clients use that in their court cases for sure.
Yeah. So you have to be smart about it too. So you have to be able to reach out and ask for help, but not necessarily on social media. So yeah, in a public way. So what other things would you say, the other communication strategies that you're using?
Okay. So when back to when one person is not really, on board with the divorce and the other one is, talking it through and apologizing and really hearing each other, is important. So, you may need to, ask, each other, what can we do here to put the past in the past. And I've worked with couples to do that, where they really need to just vent a little bit and say, I can't believe that we bought this house when you knew you wanted a divorce. A year and a half later, you're asking me for a divorce after we bought this house together, or, you know what I mean? So those kinds of things where, you don't want to rehash everything because you're getting divorced. You don't really need to, but maybe there does need to be some conversations about some sticky subjects that need to be just heard. So I would offer to listen to each other and not defend. Too often defensive-ness is the worst communication for couples. Once you become defensive, you're not listening, you're not working through things. So be really careful about becoming defensive. If somebody's upset about something in the past, just let them say it, hear it, and then move on. So if you can do that, another communication technique is, when you're co-parenting, once you've had that conversation and you're done with that, you don't need to have any emotional conversations like that. You just treat each other like your colleagues, your coworkers, and you really just have to work together. Treat each other respectfully. Don't bring up the past. Don't say critical or negative things to the other one. Be careful. Use I messages, which is, I feel, frustrated when you bring our daughter to the house late. Could you please try to be on time from now on? So you use an I message. And, if there's any provocation, like if you're dealing with someone who's provoking you, then you ignore the provocation. You don't need to respond to every negative text or email. You don't have to respond. Only respond to the ones that you really have to.
Right. I love some things because you're talking about the empathy, which is just really important. you made me think of kind of like a talking stick, right? Everybody sort of wants to feel, doesn't mean you have to stay there, but everybody wants to feel like they were heard at least. Once they acknowledge that once they know you at least heard them, I think a lot of times people can move on. But until that, if you just keep, like they say how they feel, but then, and you just move on and act like you didn't hear it, or you, again, dispute it, right? Push back on it, then they don't really feel heard yet. So I think just allowing someone to feel heard is so important. Putting the past in the past, not rehashing it constantly. I think, again, if somebody feels heard, then I think it's easier for them to do that, I would assume.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really move forward until you do put the past in the past.
Yeah. Otherwise it just keeps coming back up. Right. Yeah. Getting in the middle of everything. So you touched about, finances. I would think that has to be probably one of the most, I would say the kids and the finances are probably the two most difficult ones to probably sift through.
Well, I think the finances are really scary for a lot of people, because you're not going to be able to have probably the life that you were living financially. But that doesn't mean that you can't make sure that you're in a decently a decent space financially. Like there's a lot of things that people can do, creative things in terms of alimony and child support and division of marital assets that maybe they wouldn't think of on their own. It's not black or white. It's really good to try to think of creative solutions. Like alimony could be higher in the beginning because, the person needs to get on their feet, and then it could step down over time. There are things that, people have to really try to be creative and work together to try to find solutions, because, you don't want one of the parents to be really struggling financially. And that's very stressful. It's not good for the children.
Right. I was going to say, ultimately, it's not good for the kids. I always joke when we got to the financial side and say, I had a really good attorney, just not as good as my ex's, which, I can look back about now and laugh. But at the same time, there had to be the stability of both of us. Otherwise, when the kids were in one place, you don't want them to feel unstable, like that's an important piece for them, especially if they've had that stability. And then there's already a lot of things being changed.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is that you think that your kids need like a big house or all this stuff. And, if they're two happy households, it doesn't matter, how big the house is. It doesn't matter how much stuff you have, kids want to be where they're happy, and they don't really care that they don't have an extra 3 bedrooms to play in.
You're absolutely right, and you bring up something that I've shared this on with someone else when I was interviewing them. But at the end of the day, the bottom line has always been that I always feel like the more that I could live in my joy, the more that my children could live in theirs. And when you're not, and even when you're faking it, they know. And I mean, sometimes you do have to fake it. I'm not saying that. I mean, there are times when life just, you have to be stable still for your kids, obviously, and maybe you don't feel that stable, but you reach it. But I knew when I woke up in the morning, I had to do whatever I needed to do to raise that bar a little higher for myself. And then eventually you can baby step your way there too. But I just knew the more that I could be there, and that helped me to get there, knowing that, right, that if I was in a good place, then they could be in a good place.
Right. And that goes for also what you say about the other parent. Like if you are criticizing the other parent, if you say negative things to the children about the other parent, kids don't do well. It's really not okay for kids when you say negative things about the other parent. And that's so hard because especially when you're going through divorce, you are adversaries, really. I mean, you're splitting time with the kids, you're splitting financial assets, all the stuff either goes to one or the other. But if you can think about it, like what you just said, is that like, if you're both happy, your kids will be happy. So if you can not say anything negative, and if you can hope for the best for both of you. And I know that takes you being an adult, like a big person, to do that, and put all your own stuff to the side, which you can't always do, but you try to do as much as possible.
Right. I mean, you have to be real too and authentic at the same time. But I just knew, so I grew up where my mom was actually sad a lot. And so I'm very aware of that, right? Because she did cry a lot, and I would be, and I knew if I could actually tell jokes when I was even really, really young, I could make her laugh, and then it would make me feel better, right? But you don't want your kids making them feel like they have to, be trying to help you be happy. You don't want them to take on that role. But some kids are wired to do that. I was, like I felt like a kid and say I raised my parents well. But I mean, they fought like crazy, but at the end of the day, I just wanted them to be happy. So when they finally got divorced and they were both actually individually happy, it was like one of the best days for me. And, you think about divorce being this horrible thing for the kids. The truth is that they really want to see their parents be happy.
Right. I mean, the studies show if you can be not fighting and divorced, it's actually kids turn out pretty good, so it's similar to people who are divorced who don't fight. The research shows that there's not a lot of difference in the outcomes for children.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's like, well, and of course we have so much, I'm sure, longitudinal research now, I mean, years ago when my parents got divorced, it was kind of like nobody gets divorced, kind of thing. So it was a little bit different. There wasn't a lot of that, longitudinal studies out there, but I'm sure that is. So that's nice to know it's really, at the end of the day, it's about, I think, kids feeling safe, secure, stable, happy. And, it's not about whether the parents are together or not. It's about whether or not the kids have that sense of that, and you want that in both places.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So is that, so the other thing you talk about, some of the ideas that can foster for that peaceful, healthier process. What other ideas do you usually share?
So, good communication. So where you're both actively communicating, you can have, emails and texts with each other on a regular basis. If you can avoid, bringing up the past, saying anything negative about the other parent. And, you could even do family events together. That takes a special kind of relationship if you can do that. But I had my son's graduation and both my ex and I gave it together, and all of our family and friends were together. And, it was really a special day for my son. And he, could see that there wasn't tension there. Kids can tell when there's tension, even if you try to make everything okay. And for me, we didn't have the greatest relationship in the beginning, but we got to a place where it's good now. And so for our kids to see and feel and be relaxed when they're with us, that's really good. Because what you don't realize is that when there's tension and you try to make everything seem that it's okay, the kids feel it. That's not a settling, good, healthy, peaceful feeling, and they don't want to be in that situation. And if you can do whatever you have to do to get to a place where it's not tense, that's the best situation to co-parent peacefully. And you may be very different people. You may have very different ideas and opinions, but you don't have to agree on everything. You have to, come to agreement on some things, but otherwise let it go.
Yeah. Well, I will say my parents, maybe didn't get everything. They didn't get everything wrong. They didn't get everything right. But what they did get right for sure was after they got divorced. I mean, I'll never forget it. We walked out of, actually, I sat in between both of them when they got divorced because I was a little older. We walked out and my dad looked at it. He goes, right after they just had the dissolution or in divorce situation. And then he walks out and he goes, so who wants to go to breakfast? So we all ended up going to breakfast after. And I know that's probably not normal, but that's kind of, I think when I got divorced, I sort of expected that to be like, we would figure it out, right? I just assumed we'd figure it out. Well, we never really figured it out. Not totally, it wasn't horrible, but we never figured it out to that degree. But we always did holidays together. My mom would host and my dad would bring, his girlfriend over, and it was fun. And so that part we actually got, I think, right. And they were so much happier at that point that it was, for me, that ended up being a blessing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For some people, it is impossible to do that with. And I have a whole bunch of information for high conflict exes, but I don't know that we have time for that.
Yeah. So let's talk about, though, how they could reach out to you, how they could find more information, maybe tap into some of your other resources. And I know we had, I'm going to throw this up here. Put up the right one earlier. I put up the wrong banner for her.
No, that's the right one.
This is the right one. So I'm going to say it out loud just because I know some people listen to this, but www.divorcecoachjill.com. And they can reach out to you. And do you have, I should have asked this before, but do you have like a free consultation that you do with people initially? And
yeah, I do a free consultation. I also have a free PDF. It's 8 guidelines for separated and divorced parents. And then I have a free Facebook group, which is the Separation and Divorce Support Community. And I do Facebook Lives on there every Monday. And I have lots of information, and people are really supportive there of each other. So yeah, I have lots of resources for people. I'm working on a new ebook that I'm going to be putting out pretty soon. So yeah, I've got a lot of good stuff for them.
Great.
I do a blog.
We'll put any other links that are needed into the the show notes around this. So if you come back, we'll put all that up. And I know that I know your website's already up in the notes, but we'll, anything else that needs to get added, we'll make sure it gets there. And if there's any other links you want to share, even down the road, we can add them in. So
great.
Perfect. Well, okay. So we always close out the show. Thank you so much for all this amazing information. I know it's not like a fun, like exciting topic from the standpoint of funville, but it's really important. And I really appreciate you sharing. I think you probably help a lot of people, that are watch this or who are looking in this space and to get through this time and space. So, but if you were going to leave one parting thought, we call it a drop of thought. What would be your dot that you would want to leave?
So I think I was thinking about peace, and if the real way to get to a place where you're peaceful is to allow it to come in. And I think, you have to make that decision in your life that this is what you want in your future. And you can get there if that's what you put your focus on. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, you said something about allow, and I always think that we don't really achieve a lot of things in life. We actually allow a lot of, when we allow it, it flows. Yeah. So, beautiful. So, well, and the dot I always use, which, is really the whole basis of why I do this show and the things that I do. But it's that ripples don't flow in, they flow out. And if we really want to see change in our world, then it starts with us, and it starts in our own homes first and foremost. So, even if a family's breaking up, that still has to do with how we're going to show up in the world. So, anyway, thank you so much for sharing. And everyone who's watching, thank you for being with us today. And till next time, take care.